Hey folks, thanks for tuning in again. Quick video on a Mac Pro 4.1 or 5.1 heatsink. I got a question yesterday or day before that said, hey, do you have a set of instructions on how to repaste a Northbridge? And I said, no, I do not. And since I have to take this apart anyway, I have to run it through the cleaner, inspect it under a microscope, see what's wrong with it, because it's currently completely dead. I figured since I have to take it apart anyway, sorry. Anyway, I'm going to show you how to get to the Northbridge and how to repaste it. Now, just so I don't waste your time or anyone else's, thing of note, do not attempt to repaste the Northbridge without having replacement pins. These are the pins that are currently on your Northbridge. They're pretty small, pretty weak, so you want to replace them with something sturdier. Because 9 out of 10 times these things will snap, and without these pins, the heatsink does not sit flush on the Northbridge, and you can expect kernel panics, crashes, data corruption, and all kinds of fun within minutes after powering up, if you even get that far. So let me just take this apart real quick and then we'll get to the good stuff. All right, am I in frame? Kinda. So chances are you've probably repasted your processors in the past, so this process is nothing new. Take the heatsinks off, remove the CPUs, clean them up, put them back, and you know. This is for the 4.1 that has these little standoffs. So you have exactly enough space for a processor and this little black spacer ring. Along with these metal rings here, you can go finger tight on the heat sinks and you'll be fine. The pressure will be even, everything will work. Now what some people do is they put a lidded CPU in here, which means they have to add washers to this to make sure they don't crush the pins on here when they tighten the heatsink. I think that was done partially with this because it also means you have to clip off the pins that hold this heatsink connector in place so that you can extend it to properly fit the socket. So I think that was done with this one as well. Unsuccessfully. Got a few bent pins in there, so I'm gonna have to look at that. So let me get the board out. Okay, 9 screws hold the board inside the tray. So with those screws out, take the tray out. Now let's see if I need to zoom in on this. Yeah, that should do. You got a temperature sensor that you need to disconnect from the board here. And then, yeah, this thing is all smooshed up. I'm definitely not the first one to mess around with this board. It's pretty beat up. Anyway, disconnect the temperature sensor, then flip it around. And this is what you're after. Those are the pins I just showed you. And what you need to do with some needle nose pliers, I know Dana must be having a heart attack right now. He tried to do this and had a little accident. So with these pliers, let me position this so you can still see me here. You have to get your hand underneath so you can push on the pin to lift it up here. Then with the pliers, squish it together and let it slip out. So I hope this is in focus. Usually I do this with the board standing up, but if you do it now, or if I do it now, you can't see it. Alright, I might not be able to show you the second pin, because of course my camera stand is all messed up. Where are we? Alright, I might be able to show you. So push out it from the other side. Push the little barbs together, then let go from the other side and just let it go. Usually it'll slip right through. If it doesn't, you might have to give it a little push from this side. Careful not to slip. And then voila, heatsink. So I already took this apart earlier, which is why no thermal paste is on here. But I just wanted to go through that procedure. Now, if you're lucky, where am I? There we go. If you're lucky, these little barbs are still okay. If they look worn, if they look like they might not spring back out all the way, take them out, please. Because if one of these pins or both of them fail during operation, which happens, it gets pretty hot by that heat sink. The aluminum gets hot. These pins are affected by the heat. If you lose one of the pins and the heatsink no longer makes contact, you're in a bad place. You want to have some spares to put there either way. And even if the pins are still good, I make it a habit to replace them anyway. All right, this thing just came out of the cleaner. Dried it off. Now it's ready to be put back together. Or at least I'm going to put the Northbridge back on. I already inspected this under the microscope. Everything is looking good. So I can start focusing on the bent pins in the CPU sockets and work from there. But I figured I could put the Northbridge back on and at least finish my video properly. So, clean it with some alcohol. Same with the heatsink itself. There's a weird residue on this Northbridge. Keep wiping until there's nothing but a shiny finish. No lint, no dust, no weird streaks, just reflection. Okay. Then take your thermal paste of choice. For me, that's Arctic Silver. Although I was discussing switching over to thermal pads for the Northbridge. I've had really good results with thermal pads on other systems, and seeing as the what do you call it? The thermal paste on the Northbridge evaporates pretty damn quick. Doesn't really evaporate, but it dries out fast. The tension on the springs from the heatsink is pretty big, so a lot of the thermal paste is squished to the side because you never put it on even. You push down one side first, then the other side. If you try to do both sides at the same time, you still end up being uneven, which is why I like to spread out my thermal paste with a spudger. Make sure that all of it is covered in a very thin layer. So I'll spread it out first, and then scrape off as much as you can. You don't want a lot of thermal paste on your Northbridge. Just the bare minimum. So I don't know if this is showing up on camera, but we got a nice thin coat on the entire chip. So regardless of how we put the Northbridge on, it's not going to take one drop and smoosh it to one or the other side. So this can go off to the side for a second. Now, I mentioned I do not like the stock pins, so I'm going to be taking these out. If it lets me. There. I tried bending this back in shape a little, but someone definitely did not exercise caution when they were messing around with this thing. As long as you have space in all the fins, you'll be alright. Okay, then we're gonna take two. Then we're gonna take two new pins, and I'll put a link in the description as to the ones I use. There's many out there. Some people have different preferences. I prefer these. Now they are too big, so I have to take these out. And where is it? I have to clip everything down by about half. So this little, I don't even know what you call it, this little casing that the pin sits in, I have to cut it in half. So that we got about this much left. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if the camera's focusing. Then we take the pin itself and take off about half of the top. And that's one. Do the same with the other one. And that's two. Okay. Now, I'm not sure if I can show you this, since I'm sitting in front of the camera, not behind it, so I'm not sure about the focus and all that, but I'll do my best. You can see the difference in size. Now, which one do you think will hold on better? The black one or the white one? I put my money on the white one. So, fit those into the heatsink. Careful not to push down on this or squeeze it as you hold it, because this stuff is really fragile. Okay, now it's ready to go back onto the board. So this is hard to do when it's laying down. You can put the tray back, or you can put the board back in the tray first and then push it through like that. It's a little easier because it allows you to do it while it's laying down, which I currently can't do because it's on my desk, so there's no clearance underneath. I prefer to put the Northbridge heatsink on before I put the board back in the tray, so I can flip it around and make sure that both sides of the pin are properly anchored. So let me see what's the best way to do this. Let's raise this up. Where am I? Over there? Yeah, that'll work. Okay, make sure you put it the right way around. Keep an eye on that sensor cable. Then put your hand behind the Northbridge to support it and push through one pin. Then push the other one. Inspect the back. Looking beautiful. Great. Now it can go back in the tray. And this is basically the process reversed from what I showed you. Now on a 4,1, I take these little spacer rings off because I have to ultrasonic the board, and I don't want this stuff rattling around in there, making more noise than it has to, trapping more moisture in places where I can't get to. So I put these on afterwards. If you have a 5,1, aka a 2010 or 2012 Mac Pro, you don't have to worry about these spacer rings. Your CPU sits in a nice little bracket with a lever that you can open and close. Much better system than this, but it took Apple one revision to figure out what the best way was to do it. Now, if you do take these rings off for whatever reason, make absolutely sure you put them all back and you screw them in all the way. If there's a difference in height that you don't notice, by the time you put your heatsink on, it'll be uneven. You might squish your socket, bend pins, and do all that. So, this is as far as I'm gonna go for this video. Just keep in mind, when you put the CPU back on, don't forget these spacer rings. For the 4,1, you really need them. And for the 5,1, basically put the CPU in, close the bracket, paste it up, put the heatsink back. And I always say for the heatsink, tighten them down finger tight. As tight as you can go, loosely, and then give it a little twist. You'll know when to stop. There's a lot of stories out there that say, oh, I had flashing lights, half of my RAM wasn't recognized, I got beeps, I got nothing but loud fans, and it always turns out they didn't tighten the heatsink down far enough. So over tightening it is really not a concern. You are not stronger than these rings, so don't put all your force into it, but finger tight. That's the best way I can say it. What else? Oh, right. If you decide to put lidded chips, I know this is going a little off topic, but if you decide to put lidded chips in a 4,1 tray, just don't. Just don't. Because I see boards on my desk all the time that were damaged. Usually the pins were bent, or the socket was tightened so far that the socket itself broke. And judging from the heatsink, and what happened to this connector pin. This is probably one of them. Don't work with spacers, don't do any of that. Just delid your chips or buy them delidded. I have a video on how to delid. It's easy, just play it safe. Anything else? Oh, one more thing. Some people prefer to use nuts and bolts to get the Northbridge in place. I will personally never do that, because in this case the springs, you got identical pins, you got identical springs, the pressure is balanced. When you tighten it down by hand, you are not sensitive enough to know exactly if you're putting the same amount of pressure on both sides. So yeah, I don't really have faith in the whole nuts and bolts method, but if that's all you got, then by all means, just be careful. That about sums it up. I'm gonna inspect this under the microscope, see if I can figure out what's wrong with it, and have some fun playing with this. But yeah, if this helped you, if you have any comments, questions, or criticism, leave it in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye.